Our guest speaker tonight is Jenna Daugherty. Jenna is a passionate trans advocate who looks to bridge the gap with anyone who wants to push humanity forward. Homeschooled by fundamentalist Christians, she left the religion behind but kept the proactive nature of her parents' activism and applied it to her more secular advocacy. Her knowledge of the Christian culture is also why she tries to humanize her people to the Christian community and hopes to help them understand the struggle of being trans. While the survival of her people continues to be her number one focus, she realizes that long-term safety can't come without ensuring the rights of all Americans are secured. She believes that aggressive but open-minded populism is what helps bridge the divide caused by our divisive partisan culture. She believes in the good of humanity and hopes to be one of the voices that can make Americans see how much more we have in common than what divides us. Tonight, she will speak on her journey from being homeschooled by Christian fundamentalist to becoming a trans advocate. Take it away, Jenna.
Well, thank you all so much for having me. It is truly an honor as a trans woman to have a platform for our voice to be heard, especially in this very scary time that we are facing. It's crazy to think that the last time I spoke was at Palo Alto Rotary Club the day before the 2024 election. I was cautiously optimistic that love and empathy would pull Kamala over the finish line, but having grown up homeschooled by Christian fundamentalists and living through the Bush administration, I was also emotionally preparing myself for the horrible result that we all experienced the next day. As we all see, they have pulled the mask off and they are made their intentions well known that they want to do what they want to do, which is completely and totally erase trans people from every aspect of society. Media representation of us is slim to none. If we do get talked about, it's always cis people speaking for us, usually a cable news panel where the Overton window is controlled by conservatives, making baseless claims, supporting policies that strip us of our humanity, wrapped in common sense solutions to transgenderism being taken too far. Oh no. Hardly ever does the opposition effectively fight back, eventually ceding ground to their bigoted, dehumanizing narratives. I mean, how many Democrats did we hear say that Kamala lost because the Democrats went too far in supporting trans people, when really the National Democratic Party barely acknowledges our existence? I personally automatically ignore anyone who says things like sacrificing our rights should be considered to win elections. We certainly will never negotiate for our right to exist. So as you can tell, I'm incredibly passionate about our right to be heard and to exist as any person would. And that expands back to, as I mentioned, my upbringing. I, Jenna Marilyn Daugherty, was born November 15th, 1986 in Fremont, just right up the freeway here. Live to incredibly young parents, both in age and in their Christian faith. They both were addicts who were living recklessly, and having come up in the gloomy shadow of Vietnam, they were prime candidates to be swept up in what eventually was the conservative revival in the 80s, led by Reagan, which some of you may not know, he was the first to bring Christian nationalists directly into his administration. Now, my parents didn't realize just how deep the Christian nationalists wanted to plant their roots in government. They certainly weren't fascists, and they openly denounced fascism, but they were incredibly passionate, hardcore fundamentalists, and they were locked in on raising us the exact same way. I came out of the womb, basically, and they were like, here's your Bible. So, being the second of five, which my parents had in a span of 8 years, I always would joke, like, well, did you reproduce for the Lord? But, all jokes aside, it ended up being one of my saving graces, actually. Having siblings close to me in age made me, growing up in a strict fundamentalist Christian household, especially being a trans kid, I had no exposure to the outside world. While the average kid would go to school, engage in extracurricular activities, me and my siblings went to church 3 times a week, only interacting with other kids at church. Yeah. And if we went out during the school day, my mom would make us wear uniforms because she thought she was going to be arrested for breaking truancy laws. We certainly were not allowed to listen to secular music. For those of you who don't know that term, it's what Christians refer to as non-Christian music. But we did have weird exceptions. We could listen to the Beatles. We could listen to Genesis. Now, I don't know if that's a coincidence because it's the first book of the Bible, but you know. My dad would certainly tell us that only 70s Genesis, though, because they sold out in the 80s. Yes, I got my pretentious love of music from my dad. Uh, so my mom at times, though, would also just blast Rush Limbaugh in the living room as we did our schoolwork. It was totally normal for us. But I will say, though, we weren't completely sheltered. We were known as the bad house. A lot of my homeschooled friends wouldn't come over because we had a TV. So, you could just start to get a sense of just how devoted my parents were to this Christian fundamentalist culture. I started facing contradictions and problems at the age of 5 when I first started having feelings that I was the wrong gender. I used to pray to God in my bed at night and ask him to change me into a girl. I didn't know any words to describe how I felt. I just knew I wasn't a boy. Those feelings would continue to haunt me until I came out much later in life. But the trauma of not knowing how to deal with these feelings while being raised in a very judgmental, controlling culture took a long time to get over. It started very slowly at 9 years old when my sheltered upbringing was completely shattered. After the persistent begging of my parents to let me play Little League, they agreed to let me play. I was so desperate to get out of the house other than church, and this was the first time I was going to directly interact with kids outside of church. I was super stoked. And you pretty much immediately just culture shock. There was I remember these two, they were twin brothers, and they were the bad kids of Little League, and they just happened to be on my team. And so they would use profanity all the time, and then they would get into fist fights. And I remember one time just being completely shocked, like, oh my God. And I went up to them and I said, guys, Jesus doesn't like when you say the F word. And immediately they stopped in their tracks and they just laughed right in my face. So I went home that night and I just remember thinking, oh my God, I am a dork. How? I'm the coolest kid in church. What's going on? So fortunately, I was able to realize I need to socially catch up. And so at 13, after years of us Daugherty siblings begging my parents, we finally escaped homeschooling. My parents put us in Fremont Christian School, which really wasn't too much better for me. My parents were like, fine, we'll put you in school, but you can't go to public school because that's where the devil is. So, Fremont Christian it was. But it was still a significant upgrade since I was finally able to be around kids my age on a daily basis. I felt I had adjusted quite well, having spent those years between 9 and 13 trying to socially catch up as much as I could. But still, those feelings of wanting to be a girl wasn't going away. I would tell myself, no, it's sinful. You have to stop. Only to secretly dress up in my sister's clothes or my mom's clothes the next chance I could get. When I was 16, I had 2 events happen to me that would make me realize being a girl was something that I could actually obtain at some point if I ever found the strength and bravery to do it. The first was a fun moment during Spirit Week that also led me to picking my name Jenna. A girlfriend of mine named Amy came up to me and asked me if I wanted to be her twin for Twin Day. That was one of the themes for Spirit Week. And so at first I go, oh my God, does she know? How does she know? And then I go, no, you dummy. You're the class clown. Okay, if she's going to ask anybody this, it's going to be you. And so, of course, I play it off. I'm like, oh, hilarious. Let's totally do it. But deep down inside, I was like, oh, my God, this is so exciting. I'm actually going to get to do this for the first time. And so a lot of my friends were like, hilarious. Ha, 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 ha. And one of them asked, well, did you pick out a name? And I said, I didn't think that far. And the only thing I ever say about my dead name is it also started with a J. And so they were like, well, it has to be a J. And I said, well, duh, of course. And this one girl was like, what about Joan? And I was like, what? What am I, 50 years old? No. And another girl said, well, what about Jenna? And I said, oh, that's really cute. I like that. So I told myself if I ever did come out, that was going to be my name. And 12 years later, That was my name. The second event when I was 16 was incredibly tragic. How many of you know the story of Gwen Arajo? Okay, so quite a few. I was living in Fremont, of course, right next to Newark, where she was killed. She was an incredibly beautiful trans girl, horrifically murdered in 2002 as part of a hate crime for being transgender. Just 1 year older than me, lived one city over, and when her murder hit the news and eventually the national news, sparked protest from Westboro Baptist. They actually flew out to Newark and protested her funeral. It had a very significant impact on me because up until that point, I didn't know anybody who dealt with the same feelings, and let alone being one city over from me. I felt ashamed because I was hiding my feelings while she literally died, living to be who she was meant to be. I eventually went back to living my double life until college, with help from George Carlin and many other philosophers. I left Christianity at 20 and became agnostic. Then around age 25, I was coming to a crisis internally with my gender identity. I decided to use Halloween that year, as many trans women do, to test the waters. So I went as my favorite pop star at the time, Katy Perry. You know, I just realized I hadn't been clicking, but you know what? We'll do a quick, just keep clicking real quick and because you'll find my Katy Perry costume. Hey, that's me talking about how trans people don't get to talk. All right. That's baby me. I know. So cute. That's the dorky kid in the turtleneck. Yeah, that's me. Yeah. I know. Big goofy smile. And then that was Jenna when I dressed up in high school. And then Katy Perry. So that's where we're at. So yeah, I dressed up as Katy Perry for Halloween. Smash hit. And I said then and there that Jenna was gonna go out in secret till I felt comfortable coming out. And that day came when I was 28. Now, while I object to everything she is about, putting all that aside, Caitlyn Jenner's coming out was my catalyst that helped push me out of the closet. July 4th, 2015, I declared my independence and told the world that I was Jenna, and that person I was told to be from birth will be gone soon enough. I initially lived as both genders for the first year to give myself and those closest to me some time to adjust. Then around fall of 2016, I'd had enough of seeing my former self in the mirror, and I officially became the woman I was meant to be moving forward. It was an incredibly cathartic feeling to finally put that former identity to rest. That was me before I transitioned, and then that was me like right after I came out. Small, short hair. I hated that hair, by the way. Ugh. Oh, it was so hard to finally get to the length that I wanted. And now that I had successfully taken full control of my identity, I had two big goals: to become an advocate for trans rights and to be able to start my physical transition. The physical transition became my focus because I knew that with just my physical transition alone, it was a gargantuan task. I was fortunate to start a career in tech, with somehow kept me afloat as I proceeded to start my transition. I figured I would use my small platform that I had built up on my social media on the side in the meantime to start my advocacy. I knew I couldn't do nothing because of my fundamentalist upbringing. I saw from childhood how much the small but financially powerful element of Christianity was slowly buying off politicians and the courts through political loopholes in hopes to establish a Christian theocracy that would outlaw anyone who doesn't abide by their patriarchal beliefs. 2018 was my first milestone, being prescribed hormones for the first time. I was overwhelmed with joy. You can click next. That was the results of me about a year into hormones. And I would look in the mirror and it would just give me just so much happiness. Then in 2021, coming out of the pandemic, my opportunities for surgeries finally happened. When I first came out, I had no clue if I would ever get these opportunities. And if I did, I didn't know if I would have the money or the time to recover. So I just told myself, that I'm going to do as much as I could. And I was blessed enough to be able to work from home throughout this. It was crucial in being able to accomplish my next phase in my physical transition. From June of 2021 to January of 2022, I had 4 surgeries. You can click next. 3 for breast augmentation and 1 for my face. Having survived that wild block of surgeries, I still had the most important to go, my vagina. Going into 2023, I knew that I would be getting my vagina either by the end of the year or beginning of 2024. And it made me realize I needed a path for my life now that my physical transition was coming to an end. It was scary, but also so exciting because for many of us, we don't get to fully complete that plan that we make for our personal journey due to many factors. I'd put my life on hold at that point for 7 years. So I had to start thinking about my life post-transition, and it was a wild concept. But I knew I wanted to do something in advocacy, so I joined a volunteer group that helps the unhoused by working with the private and public sector to push for solutions. It wasn't long after I did that, I gave a speech that would eventually put me on the radar of those for fighting for LGBTQ rights in my city of Fremont. You can click next. Because that was pictures of me before my vagina, but everything else. And so I was really starting to become so happy with how I had been turning out. It was amazing to actually look in the mirror and say, that's who I always visioned in my head who I was. And then you can click next again. So fall of 2022, a Moms for Liberty demagogue was running for Fremont School Board. I gave a speech confronting the hate coming from her campaign. It had made enough noise to where I had local queer activists reach out and offer to work with me. I was very excited. Heading into 2023, I was physically preparing for my bottom surgery, which was exhausting. Working full-time and starting to find help from fellow queer activists to start building my advocacy resume, so I felt I had good momentum building, and that was the speech that I gave. By spring of 2023, I was excited for my future, but also scared for my future after seeing just how deep the fascist roots of the anti-trans agenda had taken hold in the Republican Party. Seeing red state after red state attacking our fundamental right to exist had me spiraling a lot. And that's when I got the idea for one of the things I'm most proud of. You can click next. This is kind of a summary of everything that I was doing in 2023. I become friends over Instagram with this woman named Leonore, who played saxophone for a Christian ska band named Five Iron Frenzy. She had a podcast, so I asked her if she would be up to having a bridge building conversation. That's her on the top left corner. I was nervous as hell because I thought, oh, she's most certainly going to say no. But to my surprise, she said yes. Right. And it ended up being an incredibly heartfelt, genuine conversation that is so relevant, especially right now. And then a week after that, the city of Fremont honored me for my advocacy during Pride Month with the unhoused and the trans community. And then around September, a journalist from the Mercury News reached out to ask if she could do a profile piece on me. I was ecstatic and immediately said yes. And as we were getting to know each other, I am still power throughing my prep for my surgery, which I spent the rest of my year doing. And by the end of 2023, I had my surgery scheduled for January 2024, and I was riding high into the new year. And even though my contract for my job ended at the end of December, I wasn't too worried because I'd saved up for at least 5 to 6 months so I could focus on my recovery. I also threw a party where literally 3 days before my surgery, I called it Weenie Roast. We had hot dogs, and it went down at my local favorite bar. Absolute blast. So many great friends from so many points in my life came to celebrate. Definitely was so great to have that send me off. By the end of 2023, I had my surgery scheduled, and I was going into 2024 being very excited. So like I said, we had that party right before my surgery, and it was the hardest surgery of my life. I certainly lived up to it, everything I had been told. I literally had to relearn how to do everything. The first month alone felt like 2. And if I didn't have my amazing siblings take care of me, I don't know what I would have done. As it got closer to summer, I had 2 friends reach out to me asking me if I would accept being honored by my assembly member for Pride Month. I said yes with no hesitation. I was ecstatic. I couldn't believe I was being right. Yeah, Alex Lee, that's my assembly member. I couldn't believe I was being asked to be honored again for Pride Month, but this one on a much wider scale. Then 2 weeks after the ceremony, the profile piece came out. I literally felt this was my moment, that I was going to be taking that next step in my advocacy. But the rest of 2024 would not play out how I hoped it would. Excuse me. Today, I'm still trying to find work, but I'm fortunate enough to have the help of amazing siblings who have taken me in as I am looking for work. It certainly bruised my ego. It's made me question myself a lot at times, but it hasn't even come close to stopping me. In fact, in the midst of my current struggle, it's helping me to focus on what is most important to me, and that is continuing to fight for my people against those who want to do us harm. As I said before, many people don't realize just how deep the roots of Christian nationalism are in our country. The Confederates that lost the military war won the culture war, and eventually they would capture the party of Lincoln in the 1960s as an aggressive response to the social progress we had been making at the time. Because they saw the counterculture start to break their Christian white nationalist grip on their culture. They quietly started building a coalition of religious influencers and billionaire conservatives to infiltrate the government, the media, and the courts. They'll tell you it's Roe v. Wade that galvanized them into action, but really, it started with Brown versus Board of Education when they desegregated the schools, which led to the far-right university, Bob Jones University, being stripped of their tax-exempt status in 1973 for barring Black Americans from enrolling. They knew they couldn't galvanize around that because of the progress we had made as a society up until that point. So they used Roe v. Wade as their cover. That's when you saw the rise of far-right PACs such as the Moral Majority and political think tanks like the Heritage Foundation start to emerge with demagogues like Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson being used as the public-facing representatives to paint their theocratic desire to control the culture and the government as a benign group of patriotic Americans fighting back against their unfair persecution that they face for their religious beliefs. Now, sadly, we're seeing the fruits of their labor come to fruition, especially with Trump speedrunning their implementation of Project 2025, because they know it's now or never. But as scary as it is, we must remember that Trump did not win a majority of Americans and had the lowest popular vote margin in the history of this country. Evil barely took hold by the skin of its teeth. Those of us who believe in love and humanity overwhelmingly outnumber those who believe in hate. And it's moments like this that inspire me to fight more than ever, especially knowing that many Christians I grew up with do not believe in such a dark, theocratic vision for this country. This moment for me is clarifying because they have gone full mask off. It helps me see more clearly who I can work with and who I can't. And knowing that there are a lot more of us than them makes me more confident to reach out and work with as many people as I can. There is no plausible deniability anymore because they have made their evil intentions known. It's certainly not going to be easy. It's going to be very hard. But if we can find a way to bring all of us who believe in love and humanity together, we can easily win. We cannot allow them to steal our joy, and I believe they won't. Thank you.
representing the trans community and getting Alex Lee support.
I couldn't believe that. To this day, I'm still kind of dumbfounded.
I've been personally impacted by Jenna. I've been personally impacted by her journey. I've been personally impacted by her love for others. I've been personally impacted by her advocacy for the trans community. And I really don't think anybody needs my endorsement, but I'll just say Jenna is the real deal. I would not be here today as Alicia if it wasn't for her. And I really do mean that. I came across her on a radio show, or well, not on a radio show, but on a Facebook page for a radio show where she shared that she's transgender. And I immediately thought I was what you would call an egg at the time. And I had already identified myself as a crossdresser, and I was kind of dabbling with stuff. And I feel ashamed to say it like this, but I Facebook stalked her for probably about 6 months. And then I finally reached out to her. And I remember the first time I reached out to her, the first thing she said is, that name that your profile says, like, no. You are Alicia to me. She was one of the first people I told about the first makeover I got. She's one of the first people that I talked to for any big step in my journey. And I just want to say that I think that one of the biggest parts of trans advocacy is being there to support other trans people and being there to mentor, shadow, and just cheer for other trans people on a personal level. And Jenna has done that with me. So just wanted to share that.
So I was interested in how you actually got started in being sought out. So how do you start to become an advocate? What do you do to get known? Is it on your own independent Facebook page? Do you start networking or going to political rallies? How did you become known and respected and sought after for your views?
Well, I appreciate that you think that I'm being sought after. I feel like I'm at a point in my advocacy where I'm just now starting to get enough momentum to get the ball rolling. It's really hard to be an advocate because it doesn't pay. And you have to be able to put in time for so many things to not get, and knowing that you're not going to get paid, but you know that it doesn't matter because the point is you have a message that's much more important than any dollar value. And I knew what I was good at: promoting myself, speaking in public. I have zero shame, zero fear of people. Sometimes it gets me in trouble because I'm a little bit too aggressive. But for me, I'm constantly thinking, okay, I'll give you an example. This is my mentality. When I found out that I was being picked to be honored by Alex Lee, I got super stoked. And immediately I was like, okay, what's going to be my outfit? What am I going to write? This, and that. But mentally, I had already moved on. I said, box checked. Where am I going next? Like you just, it is a grind almost. And you have to face a ton of rejection. And you have to be able to take that rejection in stride, not take it personal, and even be able to learn from it. If you did something that maybe that wasn't appropriate, or maybe like you're giving the speech, you messed up or whatever, right? You just, I guess the best way to put it is you just throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall, and everything that drops off the wall, okay, whatever. But the things that stick on the wall, pursue that with like 1,000% intensity. And then eventually more stuff's going to continue to stick to the wall to the point where people are going to say, oh, I know her. I'm going to suggest her to her or him or them or whatever. And then eventually people are going to be calling you, right? So I'm not at that point. I've had a couple moments in my life where it was, like I said, Alex Lee. I had two people that suggested me I didn't even know. So But where I want to be is I'm nowhere near that. Right now, I am just being able to, stand up and walk as far as like my advocacy career is going. And so, I guess what I would say is don't be afraid to try anything, and don't be afraid to be persistent, even if you believe people might find you annoying. Because if you truly believe in what you do, you're going to find the people that will help you. One of the things I always tell trans, like, we call when people like are new in their transition, we call them baby transes. And
like baby dykes.
yeah, like yes, exactly. Good comparison. The one thing I tell them is you're going to have support that you never expected, but you're also going to have huge disappointment from people that you thought would be there for you, and everywhere in between. It's a wild spectrum. And so the one thing I've learned is I can never fully like assume anything about any group or any age group, demographic. There we go. I just always, the ones that are willing to work with me, I tell them you better buckle in because we're gonna go full speed. And the ones that get it will stick with you. And then the ones that don't, you just depends on their attitude, right? Like if they're hesitant and they're scared, but they're not mean, I'll put them on the back burner. Bigots, yeah, fuck them. You don't even waste your time. So yeah. I guess to say it's a wild card. You don't know for sure.
And has anything changed in the way that you move forward, act, or pursue your advocacy with the atrocity of 47?
Well, it's like I said, I'm more emboldened. We've learned with fascism in the past that capitulating never is successful, because in the end, they're still going to get rid of us, right? So it's either you go out, for me, it's you go out guns blazing. You put your foot down, you lock it into the ground. They're never going to get me to be silent. They're never going to get me to stop talking. Now, I'm fortunate. I live in a blue state, in one of the bluest counties of California. And so for me, I feel an obligation to speak even louder, to push even farther, to give a voice to those of us in our community that don't have the privileges that I have. And I think that if everybody takes that attitude, it's going to make things a lot easier, because there's many of us in red states that are not going to be able to do as much as us. So we kind of have to make up for it.
And how can allies support the trans community best?
The best way to do it is the best example I've heard is if we're getting spit on, you have to receive some of that spit as well. Mm-hmm. You can't just sit there and say like, oh, I support trans people. And if someone comes up to you and starts berating you for it and you're just like, oh my God, no, whatever. No, you have to be willing to take that punch. You have to be willing to face just a tiny bit of what we face. And that's what a true ally does. They advocate, and they're willing to put themselves in front of us to protect us.
I'll be your Secret Service.
Thank you. Can we get like a fun code name? Oh, sorry.
This is a question from the chat. If you could build your own paid job within your advocacy work, what would it be?
If I could build my own what, sorry?
Paid job.
Oh, my own paid job?
Yeah.
I think about that all the time. Well, certainly keynote speaker, but more so, I grew up in the age of the internet. So I watched 4chan go from this dorky for the lulz kind of trolley chat room to an army locked in for Donald Trump. A lot of people outside of the internet and outside of the right wing don't understand how effective the right wing is at media dominance. And so I would set myself up with like a YouTube channel, like all different kinds of social media channels that would hit hard and often against the right wing, because we need to have aggressive media presence. They can't, I'll give you an example. Nancy Mace today in Congress said the T slur 4 times. And in response, Jerry Connolly was just like, oh, don't do that. That's not nice. No, these people do not care. They're really good at not only being aggressive and bullying, but if you fight them back, they will say, oh, no, it's my free speech. Oh, how dare you? And then they paint themselves as the victim. And so a lot of people don't know how to don't understand how to deal with that. But I do. And so I would try to find, I would use my social media presence to fight back against a lot of the hardcore right-wing media manipulation, disinformation that we see. But I also have thought about setting up a underground railroad type situation for trans healthcare in red states. If I had the money and I had the legal access to do it, absolutely. It's incredibly crucial for every trans person to be able to get trans healthcare. I have a lot of ideas that require a lot of involvement from and a lot of money. So I hope that wasn't then.
Things. I've never heard anybody speak about those 2 things, but I do think that if you started to speak about them, you would have a lot of people on your side.
I think so
So
too.
I would just really encourage you, because I think those are amazing ideas
Thank you.
that you should start speaking about them and start to build your following. Because I would follow you, and I think everybody in this room would follow you.
Thank
No,
you.
seriously.
It's very sweet of you.
I think it's needed.
It is
I
much
think
needed.
it's crucial and critical. And yeah, I applaud you for those thoughts. I have not seen them out there, and I would like to see them out there.
Well, thank you. They are out there, but they need to get more out there. Yeah.
Okay, let's pass it to you then.
Jenna, I'm curious to ask about your parents and the relationship right now you currently have with them. Is it open or is it closed? How's that going?
My relationship with my parents is the most complicated one. My parents divorced when I was 17. So, my dad, out of the 2, my mom is still a Christian. She tries to be more moderate, but there's a lot of work to do. She still accepts me, and so I try as hard as I can to keep my hand out there. There's times where I've had to pull it back and just say, no, you don't get to say that about me. You don't get to think that about me. But I'm always willing to take your apology and move forward. My dad told me, he didn't even actually tell me. I had to find out through my sister that he wanted nothing to do with me. And that was incredibly hard. It took me a very long time to get over. I knew that when I came out, he was going to reject me, and it still didn't help. But when I get down about it, one of the things, this is why I always tell people how blessed I truly am, because most of my trans friends deal with far worse. Their entire family rejecting them. And so when you're able to have most of your family accept you in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty amazing. Really, it still really hurts to not have a relationship with my dad and knowing that he's never going to talk to me ever again. But you eventually learn. I tell people a big reason how I was able to get over it was because of my surgeries. I was able to make it through my entire transition. I always want to stress that this is my personal transition. Not every trans person has the same goals as me, right? But once I was able to get through all the goals that I had for myself, I looked back and said, I did all of that without my dad. And that's what really helped me be able to start to get over being rejected. So, not great. But my mom, I still love her, and she's gotten better, a lot better. So I have a tiny bit of optimism with my mom. No, you can ask me as many as you want.
But I wanted to piggyback on that. Like, how's your relationship with your siblings?
My siblings are great for the most part. One is tough. Some recent revelations have come up that I've had to deal with, and I'm scared that it's going to go south permanently. But everyone else has been amazing. And both of my sisters took me in after my surgery and made sure that I was good to go with everything, and just never once. I mean, my sister Hannah specifically, when I was still living as both genders, she came to me and said, hey, because I told her, I said, I'm thinking about going full time soon. And this was around the time of her wedding. And she said, hey, you know that I support you 100%. I just need to know which one you're coming as, because, we had to prepare the family and whatnot. And I said, totally understand. Not a big deal. I said, I'm going to come as Jenna, and you don't worry about talking to Dad. I will tell Dad, because that was around the time that when I was living as both genders, I would always just go visit my dad as my former gender, because I didn't want to have to deal with the shit that I was going to get. And so I wrote an incredibly long, heartfelt, reach out my hand to help letter to my dad as much as I could, because I knew he was going to reject me. So I didn't want to get all spiteful or anything. And he never responded. And that was when my sister told me, because she kept asking me, did Dad respond yet? I said no. And so she finally responded. She finally asked him, and she called me back crying, like, I'm sorry. And I said, what can you do? And she said, fuck him. You're coming as Jenna. If he doesn't like that, tell him to fuck off. And so, I have incredible siblings. I'm very, very lucky to have them. Yay!
Yay, siblings. We have a question in the chat from Ikram/Drelf. Might be off topic, but you did mention it. Sure. How would you fight back against these Megans who hit hard and then get all defensive and wah when someone calls them out?
I'm sorry. How would I respond to Nancy Mace? I'd be go cry about it, snowflake. I'm a woman. Deal with it. Yeah. You want to be a bigot? Go outside. I don't give a fuck. You have to. These people play off of people's niceties, and they're able to flip it to make you look like you're the asshole really quickly. And so I just don't ever give them that option. I just tell them, I'm a woman. Science says I'm a woman. If you don't believe in science, that's your fucking problem. Because their biggest thing is they always say, like, oh, it doesn't make sense because, science says that you're a man, blah, blah, blah. And they're using like 5th grade fucking science. And you are just like, no, actually, science says that gender and sex aren't the same thing. So if you're just assuming, and by the way, you don't actually know my chromosomes. So, you just have to constantly just give them no outs and force them to own their hate and their bigotry, because then that way they have no card to play. They'll cry, oh, I'm a victim, whatever. Cool. Go cry victim in the corner. I don't give a fuck. Like, it's just like, we want to live. We don't deserve to be harassed and told that we're people who are grooming children. You know who groomed children the most? Cishet white men. How many trans people do it? None. But they don't care because they live in a, echo chamber where all they hear is groomer, predator, this, that, man, blah, blah, blah. And that's the big thing about transphobia that always kills me, is it's always cis people talking to other cis people. They don't ever talk to trans people. It's like a big circle jerk of transphobia. Caitlyn Jenner's, Blair White's, exactly. Yeah.
Feel
Yeah, I'll wait till the microphone so the people on the webcam. Yeah.
As much as you face in opposition and obstacles that you face, do you feel that you have it easier than individuals of color that transition?
1000%. My skin color gets me into rooms that trans people of color will a lot of times will never get into. And so as an advocate, it's really hard because I have to emphasize that I don't speak for everyone, but at the same time, I have to be able to speak for everyone because most of us won't get into the rooms that I get into, right? So it's a combination of humility, but also standing firm in your principles and saying and bravely saying whatever the fuck you want to say, but also being diplomatic, right? It's a constant mind fuck.
When you're out there advocating, do you ever bring that up or even say that I'm here speaking to you today out of a place of privilege that was, given to in different places where you can be in the room?
Yeah, it's hard.
Very clumsy. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's hard because you can't come across as like too white savior.
Yeah.
But you also have to acknowledge your privilege, right? And so I'm always constantly thinking about, am I coming across as too white savior? But also, am I acknowledging my privilege enough, right? So I try to use specific words that aren't super like liberal white savior, if that makes sense. But also trying to cut through the bullshit, right? That's why I like a populist approach, because it's at the end of the day, it's class. You got intersection, right? Class and race. And that's it.
There's one other privilege that you touched on, and I know we've talked about this individually. We have enormous privilege called blue state privilege.
Also, yeah.
Living in California, I mean, this is, if we get, if people start getting rounded up, we're going to be the last state that happens in, probably.
Yeah.
And what are some ways that you think that we here in these like trans friendly states, how can we utilize that privilege to help our trans sisters, brothers, and NB in hostile states?
Well, it's hard because so much of our community is so disadvantaged in so many social economic factors, right? One of us alone can't like buy healthcare for every trans person in a red state. I tell my fellow, trans comrades who want to do more, I tell them, get involved in your local community. Do something that's going to make a positive effect in your local community. And if you're able to have an impact outside of it, that's great. But I know for myself, I can't get too caught up in the big picture of trying to help everybody because it's just impossible. But if you can go around and constantly make an impact on a trans person in your own community, or a gay person, or any marginalized person in your own community, well, then that's still a positive step forward. And if we're all doing that together in all 50 states, it may be at a snail's pace, but we're still pushing back against fascism in the big picture. And that's why this time around with the second Trump administration, I wanted to try and be able to be more involved locally because that's where it's going to matter the most. We don't have much say over what Trump wants to overturn an executive order. Well, we have to hope that the courts are going to say no. We can't do anything about that. Trump wants to force us to go into men's prisons. Super fucked up. I can't do anything about that. We have to hope that the judges, right, the ACLU, are going to fight that battle for us. I'm going to focus on my local community, and with the small platform that I have, maybe I can give some hope to some trans people in red states who are suffering. You know, you just constantly try and do what you can at all times. That's what I would say.
I think that was beautifully said.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions?
Sandy.
All right, Sandy.
I love it, Sandy. You can give me questions all night long. That's great. You are my mom, after all. Yeah.
How do you feel about the Americans that are crossing their borders and moving out of the United States for the duration of the Trump? How does that affect? And just curious about your opinion about those that are choosing to bail.
I don't see it as choosing to bail. If any trans person told me I'm scared for my fucking life, yeah. You want to go to Canada? Do it. Make sure you protect yourself. It's hard to do what we're doing. Oh, even the allies. Like, I want everyone that wants to work. If you have any hesitation at all and you want to leave, go for it. Like, there's 330 million people in this country. There's far more of us than there are the Christian fascists. So, like, if, let's say, like, 10,000 leave, okay, I don't really care. What's happening right now is too important. We need to focus on what's happening. We can't be focused on little things that are going to distract us. And if someone, and they have legitimate fears, I don't want to take away from that. So then, sure. I used to be more concerned about making sure that other people stood up and fought. But it just brings a lot of unneeded stress. If you ask me, yeah, I would say everybody should stay and fight. But at the end of the day, your business is your business. And what I want to do is make sure we fucking survive. And so if you are 100% like me, great, join me. If you have any hesitation, or, you know, that's not even true, because I will talk to people who are scared, but they'll step in here and there, right? Like, they stay behind, but they can only do so much, right? They only have so much bandwidth to do it. Great. I'll use you when you're ready, right? It's all about constantly keeping a positive affirmation. And unless it's super necessary to be negative, I don't think there's any point in doing it when the enemy is so massive, right? So honestly, like, it doesn't even cross my mind most of the time. If people say, oh, I'm going to leave, I'm like, okay, cool. I get it. Don't take it personal at all. Just next. So.
All right. So thank you so very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Seriously. It really means a lot. The questions were fantastic, and I really appreciate this opportunity. Love you all.